It's late at night, and you're home alone. You're young, and this is the first time it's happened. You were excited at first, but as the sun's light faded beyond the horizon and darkness covered the outside world, you were compelled to turn on every light in the house. An urging sense of fear overtook you, and now you're checking every room to make sure you really are alone. Next are the windows. You pull every drape and drop every blind. If a window doesn't have one, you close the door to that room. You check for any slight crack in the coverings, and now become acutely aware of every subtle sound there is to hear. A ticking clock. Distant traffic from the main roads. A faint sound you can't label. It was a wisping sound. Or was it a whisper? At this point, you're terrified, but you don't know what about. You hear the sound again. It isn't the wind. It can't be. It isn't consistent enough. What is it? You feel like you could die as you stand still in the living room, your head bowed, your fists clenched. All you can do now is listen. The sound comes again. It lasts for no more than 2 seconds, but it echoes in your mind on a constant loop. You will not survive the night. You're certain of it. You can imagine someone breaking in, or they're already inside, waiting to simply reveal themselves to you. The sound comes again. It is beginning to have a pattern. Maybe it is just the wind, coming in small gusts. Or maybe that's just what it wants you to think. It is no longer an imagined person. It could still be human, but now it could also be a creature. One that has the same intelligence as humans, maybe even more. And it is a predator. Right now, it is slowly driving you mad before taking its action. Is it an alien? A vampire? A demon? An eldritch god? Some other form of entity so terrifying and unknowable that to even fear such a thing doesn't make sense? You're already dead and don't even know it. Could this all be a dream? Or are you in purgatory? The sound comes again. This time, it brings a wave of relief. At least the sound is something real. It brings you back to the present. Your fear seems to revert. You imagine a human intruder again, come to kill you, but then that fear slowly fades away too. You raise your head to find yourself where you've always been, alone in your house. You feel foolish to have let yourself become so psychologically vulnerable. You take your first step in a while and realize that your muscles are sore from standing. You make your way to your bedroom, sick of the night and wanting to sleep it all away. You close the door behind you, thinking you should turn the lights off, but won't. Fear creeps back into your mind, and you do everything you can to push it back down. You turn the lamp on and turn the main light off. It seems darker than it should be, but you know your eyes will adjust. You get into bed and distract yourself by listening to music. It works profoundly well, carrying you off to sleep. But then, you hear a sound. It's not a wisp, it's a creak. You look down the length of your bed, and your room has become longer than you remember. It stretches away from the lamp's light into pure darkness. In that darkness, you become aware of a presence. It doesn't make a sound. You can't see it. There's no way you can know anything is in the darkness, but you know with complete certainty that your gaze into the void is being met right back. It's not right. None of it is right. It shouldn't have come to this. You were always going to die tonight. Why couldn't it have been when you were standing in the living room? Why did it wait until you were asleep in your bed to come for you? It must have wanted that fear to subside. Maybe it makes a fresh wave of fear even greater. The thought is sickening. It seems sexual, like an act of intercourse being prepared beforehand by foreplay. It's evil. You hate it. You hate this thing with everything you have. You want to kill it, thrash at its throat, screaming the whole time. But as you lay, you are still and silent. Your mind is on fire. And then you wake up. Natural morning light cascades into your bedroom. even against the muffling of drapery, and you blink to assure that you really are awake. The light beside your bed isn't necessary, so you turn it off. You feel like a spell is lifting. You remember how terrified you were last night, but you can't pin down about what. Against your own wishes to forget the whole ordeal, you rethink what happened, trying hard to relive every moment. It started with lights, then the windows, then sounds. The fear appears again. It trickles down your spine like a faucet turned off that still had a few drops to release. You catch yourself attempting the same self-destructive imagining that caused you to become so afraid before. But as you do so, you still question your own thinking, wondering why you tried so hard to make yourself afraid. And afraid of what? You couldn't pin that down either. It wasn't exact. It was a shapeless, out-of-focus fear. The main thing was that you didn't know. Whatever it was you feared, you simply didn't know. And that was the scariest part. Hello and welcome back everyone to another thought piece by me, ya boy, Joe Van. Today's topic is, well, a lot of words can describe it, but I'll start with fear of the unknown. The psychological term for fear of the unknown is xenophobia. In modern usage, the word has evolved to mean the fear of strangers or foreigners, but its original meaning is much broader. It includes anything or anyone that's unfamiliar or unknown. Now let's start by getting into the cause. First, let's make a difference between innate fear and learned fear. Although many fears are learned, the capacity to fear is part of human nature. Many studies have found that certain fears, examples being animals or heights, are much more common than others. These fears are also easier to introduce in the laboratory. This phenomenon is known as preparedness. Because early humans that were quick to fear dangerous situations were more likely to survive and reproduce, preparedness is theorized to be a genetic effect that is the result of natural selection. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, different fears may be different adaptations that have been useful in our evolutionary past. They may have developed during different time periods. Some fears, such as the fear of heights, may be common to all mammals and developed during the Mesozoic period. Other fears, such as the fear of snakes, may be common to all simians and developed during the Cenozoic period. Still others, such as a fear of mice and insects, may be unique to humans and developed during the Paleolithic and Neolithic time periods, when mice and insects became important carriers of infectious diseases and harmful for crops and stored foods. But now to learned fears. Animals and humans alike innovate specific fears as a result of learning. This has been studied in psychology as fear conditioning. Beginning terribly with an asshole named John B. Watson's Little Albert experiment in 1920, which was inspired after observing a child with an irrational fear of dogs. In the study, an 11-month-old boy was conditioned to fear a white rat in a laboratory. The fear became generalized to include other white, furry objects, such as a rabbit, dog, or even a ball of cotton. Let's all give a big, loud, fuck you, John B. Watson. This is why scientists get a bad rap. But since we have the study, what can we learn from this? If a child falls into a well and struggles to get out, he or she may develop a fear of wells, heights, acrophobia, closed spaces, claustrophobia, or water, aquaphobia. There are studies looking into the brain to find the affected area related to fear, and when looking at these areas, such as the amygdala, it was proposed that a person learns to fear regardless of whether they themselves have experienced it or observing others. In a study completed by Andreas Olsen, Catherine I. Nearing, and Elizabeth A. Phelps, the amygdala were affected both when subjects observed someone else having an adverse event and they themselves experiencing it. This suggests fear can develop in both conditions, not simply from personal history. Fear is affected by cultural and historical context. For example, in the early 20th century, many Americans feared polio, a disease that can lead to paralysis. There are consistent cross-cultural differences in how people respond to fear. So now, let's dive into the specifics. Fear of the unknown. Xenophobia, or Neophobia, is a fear of the unknown or irrational fear that's caused by negative thinking, also known as worry, which arises from anxiety accompanied by a subjective sense of apprehension or dread. Irrational fear shares a common neural pathway with other fears, a pathway that engages the nervous system to mobilize bodily resources in the face of danger or threat. Many people are scared of the unknown. The irrational fear can branch out to many areas, such as the hereafter, the next 10 years, or even tomorrow. Chronic irrational fear has deleterious effect, since the elicitor stimulus is commonly absent or perceived from delusions. Such fear can create comorbidity with the anxiety disorder umbrella. Being scared may cause people to experience anticipatory fear of what may lie ahead rather than planning and evaluating for the same. For example, a continuation of scholarly education is perceived by many educators as a risk that may cause them fear or stress, and they would rather teach things they've already been taught than to go and do research. The ambiguity of situations that tend to be uncertain and unpredictable may cause anxiety in addition to other psychological and physical problems in some populations, especially those who engage it constantly, for example in war-ridden places or in places of conflict, terrorism, abuse, etc. Poor parenting that instills fear can also debilitate a child's psyche development or personality. For example, parents tell their children not to talk to strangers in order to protect them. In school, they would be motivated to not show fear in talking with strangers, but to be assertive and also aware of the risks and the environment in which it takes place. Ambiguous and mixed messages like this can affect their self-esteem and self-confidence. Researchers say talking to strangers isn't something to be thwarted, but allowed in a parent's presence if required. Developing a sense of equanimity to handle various situations is often advocated as an antidote to irrational fear and as an essential skill by a number of ancient philosophies. Conclusively, fear of the unknown, or FOTU, quote, may be a, or possibly the, fundamental fear, unquote. This was written by R. Nicholas Carlton in June of 2016 under the Journal of Anxiety Disorders. Now, to better understand this and combat this, let's ask the question, what are the most common symptoms of this type of phobia? This should seem obvious, but it's still important to make mention of. They include a fast heart rate, quick, shallow breathing, tense muscles, feelings of weakness, and blood glucose spikes. When the threat is short-lived, these symptoms go away quickly, but if you feel a near constant fear of the unknown though, it can seriously harm your health. If you're prone to worrying about the unknown constantly, you may have developed a habit of catastrophizing, or imagining worst-case scenarios. Catastrophizing is known as a cognitive distortion. This is a way of thinking that creates an inaccurate view of reality. This is almost often always caused from early childhood traumas, a lack of predictability in one's life, and especially a lack of control. Another thing that may seem obvious but still worth mentioning, who is at risk for this type of phobia? Of course, those with anxiety and fear disorders, but also those with depression, those who have experienced alcohol use disorder, and disordered eating habits, but also including those with OCD and hoarding disorder. So now, how can you overcome the fear of the unknown? The first one is to question your assumptions. We all think we know more than we do, so it helps sometimes to stop and ask yourself, to what extent are your beliefs logical? Also, how self-aware are you that you may have a fear of the unknown or the condition called catastrophizing? Next, make sure to simply do your own research. This step is particularly important if you experience of the unknown related to your finances. It may be scary to look at bills and budgets, but simply doing so and having an accurate understanding of where you sit will help empower you to make better decisions. Next, stay grounded in the here and now. Being present is the ultimate key. You can take actions today to reduce the possibility of a negative outcome down the road. By listing factors that are within your control and then taking small steps each day, you can shore up your sense of responsibility and control over your life. Next, find ways to manage stress with a healthy lifestyle. Again, these are classic examples I'm sure everyone's heard before, but still, just to drill it home, make sure you exercise, rest well, eat nutritious foods, make sure you have good relationships in your life, and stay on top of mindfulness. Self-awareness is the key. Finally, talk to someone you trust. A therapist may be able to help you process the fear of the unknown and devise strategies to reframe your thinking patterns in helpful ways. If now isn't the right time for you to try therapy, talk to a trusted friend or write down your concerns in a private journal. Sometimes the act of naming your fears shrinks them down to size. Finally, it's important to understand that you can't know everything. The future is the future for a reason. It in and of itself is the unknown. So accepting is another very, very important part to overcoming. And that is where I'm going to leave today's video. Thank you guys so much as always for stopping by. I wish you nothing but love in your life and ask you to remember to keep on thinking. Thanks for stopping by, and until next time, ciao for now. Peace.